Hey, it's Edwin Canestracci here, and we're going to do it. We're finally going to do it. You know, it had to happen eventually. That's right, this band, AC/DC, the one and only, rocking the powered shirt, got the flat cap on, and we're going to do it. I'm going to try to keep it in an hour. I think you could do this all. Bond, Brian ears, the whole deal. And I'm drinking some Johnny Walker Double Black. Bon Scott's favorite drink was actually Johnny Walker Black. I don't think they had Double Black back then, but if they did, he would have surely loved that because he was a Black Label man, and Double Black is like Black Label but double. So who wouldn't want that? Anyway, already a drink in or two. But anyway, we're gonna have a fun time here. And what I'm also going to do, I'm going to count the Australian albums. That's right, the Aussie albums, because my wife's Aussie, and I like to respect her homeland. Plus, it's how these guys originally recorded the albums. But most people outside of Down Under, they don't know about these early versions. So I'm going to hip you to that and tell you how you can make it. First, you get the international versions, and in addition to that, you should get the Bonfire box set. That has a couple versions of songs that you can only get on that. And you can also get 74 Jailbreak, the EP, which has some other stuff that's from the early Aussie albums. And then you also need the backtracks. Yeah, especially the deluxe backtracks, which you can get actually on iTunes, and you can just get like the individual tracks, because actually the iTunes version has very specific Aussie mixes that you can't get anywhere else. So you could track all this stuff down, and you could kind of recreate these Aussie versions of the early albums on your iTunes. I did that. I'm a little OCD of music, or passionate about it, depending on your word choice. But anyway, let's get into it. No preamble. It's AC/DC. They're like my very close, I would say, right on Motorhead's ass for favorite band of all time. And for a long time, AC/DC was my favorite band. It was my favorite band as a teenager, as a young man. Now, I'm at a point in my life, I'm getting older, and I'm kind of connecting a little more with that ragged warhorse that is Lemmy. And plus, Motorhead's not quite as played out for me, their catalog, as much as AC/DC. That being said, considering how much I listened to AC/DC growing up, their catalogs, ain't that played out, considering. But we'll talk about it. A few albums are a little played out, but I still think they're awesome. But we'll get to that. I'm going to look at Wikipedia occasionally just to get the dates right, because I might say Fly on the Wall is 86, even though I know it's 85. But I could make a mistake. I'm drinking, so I don't want to give you guys BS information. So let's just jump right into it. High Voltage. Well, whoa, not the high voltage you're expecting. No, this is the Aussie version, 1975, and this is very different. This is the album this is a different album. This isn't High Voltage. We'll talk about what you all think is High Voltage later on. The Aussie version of High Voltage only has 2 songs that are on the international version. If anything, this is a little closer to, it's got 4 songs that are on the 74 Jailbreak, which are the first way I ever heard it, like most Americans, these songs. And this, it opens up with the song that's the last track on 74 Jailbreak. It opens up with that, Baby Please Don't Go. One of the few covers that AC/DC did, and that you'll hear this on their first 2 Aussie albums. They actually do a cover. This amazing song. Man, what a cover. And I've heard a lot of different versions of this song, and they're all good. Probably Muddy Waters is my favorite version next to this version. But this is a little more like the version, I think it's Them. Is that the name of the band? some British band. I think Van Morrison was in them. Anyway, this version's kind of like that version, except for much, much better. And you got Angus Young right out of the gate. I mean, even though Phil Rudd's not in the band yet, and Mark Evans isn't in the band yet either, it's just the Young brothers and Bond and some session musicians. And there's a lot of weird controversy if you read the books. Like, they don't know like who are the musicians on this album. Like, they don't know who the drummer and bassist are. There's a lot of different stories. So I don't know what they're trying to cover up. I mean, clearly someone's playing the drum and bass. I mean, maybe they don't want to give them royalties or whatever. I don't know what's going on there, but it's a big secret. So there's some drummer and some bassist playing with the Young brothers and Bond. And but still, it sounds like AC/DC. I mean, you got the double guitar attack right out of the gate, high energy. Angus does the finger tapping. And this might be, this is 75, so this is like, it's like 2 years before Van Halen's first album. So Angus Young might have been the guy who created the finger tapping, because he's doing it here on a record in 1975, and Van Halen's still just playing clubs at this point. This is a really good album, but I can't say it's a great album. It's just a good album. It's a good album, and pretty much every Bon Scott album after this is great. This is the only one that I think is just good. They haven't really found themselves yet. In some ways, it's a little like the early, kind of like Please Please Me, the Beatles. It's like, it's there. You got enough of the ingredients to see that, yeah, they're a great band and they're going to make something of themselves, but they're not quite the animal that they'll become yet later. This is like them trying things out. Like, there's even a love song on this, a ballad, which is called Love Song. And it's like, it's a love song. It's a ballad. Like, who AC/DC wouldn't do a ballad? Like, just one album later, they would already leave that stuff behind. But here, they didn't quite know what kind of band they were. There's still little elements of glam, even in terms of their image. If you see some of the clips from those days, they look a little bit like the Bay City Rollers. So, they didn't Bond dressed in drag a bit. Like, he wasn't all tough wearing denim and stuff. Like AC/DC they were a young band and they hadn't found themselves yet. There's some great moments. She's Got Balls is a standout track here, and it's got kind of the mid-tempo, kind of down and dirty AC/DC groove. But for the most part, this is just a start. I mean, this is just them starting up, but they haven't really found themselves yet. Then the next album, same year, 75, very eventful year for them, is TNT. Now, this is only an album that's available in Australia. Or is it? Because the thing is, TNT is really what we think of in the States, and I guess also in Europe. This is what we think of as a high voltage, because the international version of high voltage is essentially this album. They put 2 songs, She's Got Balls and Little Lover, from their first album, and they took off Rocker and a cover of Chuck Berry's School Days, which they took off. And then the rest, this is the same album. It opens up the same, pretty much the first half, it's exactly the same. It's a long way to the top. If You Rock and Roll is the opener here. Big hit in their homeland and a classic rock staple today. Of course, it has the Bond playing the bagpipes, and it has a great riff, and it's like their mission statement, like they're hungry. AC/DC is not hiding the fact that they want to make a lot of money. They're capitalists, and they love rock and roll. They love rock and roll and money and sex and booze and all that great stuff. And this is it. This is a mission statement. And right here, you can hear this is a big sonic leap from the first album. And you also, Phil Rudd's now in the band, and Mark Evans. So this solidifies the beginning of their first classic lineup. And there's just a big difference. And then you also got Jack. I'll be honest, I never really liked the studio version of the Jack. It's all right. I think it's a little corny. It's, you would hear them get much better later on, especially a live version of this, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But Live Wire, again, it's good, very good. I love this song. Live Wire is one of my favorite songs, but it would be so much better live performances of this song just a few years later. AC/DC, you see, would get a lot heavier. Right now, they're still just kind of almost a boogie-woogie rock and roll group, a little more like the Stones. TNT and Live Wire definitely point in a heavier direction, but both of these songs, TNT and Live Wire, would get so much heavier when they played them live just a few years later. And overall, this still has it's a little light. I love it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not selling this album. I think it's a great album. And some people, this is like one of their favorite AC/DC albums. Not me, but I do think it's a great album. I like when the band gets a little less cheeky and a little less and a little heavier down the line. Which then after that, well, this was released as High Voltage with the changes, and it's funny because you can hear like now, like She's Got Balls was like one of the better tracks from the Australian High Voltage, and now on this version, it like sticks out like as a weak track, like it's like the weakest track. So that just shows you how much they progressed in just a few months. The next album, Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, 76. Well, this is another album where things got a little weird. This album was not released in the States until 1981, until after Bon Scott was dead. As a result, because this came out after, in America, this came out after Back in Black hit, Broken was their biggest album. This album got a lot more kind of attention than a lot of the other Bon albums. And of course, the title track's a classic and became a classic rock staple. But I feel like this album, even though it is great and I do love it, I feel like it's gotten a little more attention just because it was released after Back in Black rather than before. The Atlantic, the American label, like they actually heard it and they weren't impressed with the sales from the international High Voltage, so they shelved it because this album kind of sounded like more of the same. And it is more of the same. I would say there's a little bit of progression here. You want to use the word progression with AC/DC in the songwriting, especially, and I think Bon's delivery, especially on the song "Ride On," beautiful, moving blues song where Bon really bears his soul. So there's a little bit of an evolution here, but for the most part, it's TNT Part 2, and they still have a lot of cheekiness, big balls, As a teenager, I loved this, and I still love it. But like I said, I kind of prefer when they get a little heavier and a little less cheeky. The international version, which is also the American version, is probably a little bit better in a way. I mean, it's hard to say because they took Jailbreak off and just saved that for the EP. And Jailbreak's such a strong track. It's kind of it boggles the mind why they would take Jailbreak off. One nice thing about the American version too, why I might like this version better, is it has this great song, Love at First Feel, which isn't on the Aussie version. In fact, it's not on any Aussie album. It was just a standalone single there. But this is a great track. It's really catchy, good mid-tempo stomper, and dirty lyrics from Bon. I love it. So I might give the international version a slight edge, although they're both pretty good. The next album, well, this is where they make a big jump forward, in my opinion. And this is the AC/DC. This is where we get into the AC/DC I really, really love. And this begins with Let There Be Rock, 1977. See, Let There Be Rock, after Dirty Deeds was shelved by Atlantic Records, and AC/DC had kind of peaked in Australia. They kind of hit the top there, and they hadn't quite broken in the UK and the States yet. And punk was on the rise, so AC/DC was feeling kind of like, competitive. Like, we got to really take things to the next level. We got to really rock harder and really bring it and really to make a statement, or else, it might be game over. So AC/DC, they made a statement, and you could hear this is like light years ahead sonically. And it's funny because AC/DC is a band that doesn't get a lot of credit for like evolution. Everyone acts like all their albums sound alike. And after a while, that starts to happen. But in the early days, I would say in the Bond days and in the first couple Brian albums, there's a clear evolution. I mean, just listen to High Voltage, either version, and then listen to like For Those About to Rock We Salute. I mean, they're like different bands. I mean, you couldn't get more different, especially sonically. So they were really growing quite a bit. And Let There Be Rock is where they really concentrate and get the really heavy sound. Actually, I'd say this is definitely the heaviest album with Bon, and this is where they cross over. To me, you would consider them not just a hard rock band, but also a heavy metal band. That's also in debate. Some people say, AC/DC's rock and roll, because that's what like the band likes to call themselves, rock and roll. Angus calls them rock and roll, and they are rock and roll. But I would say from Let There Be Rock to up to and including Fly on the Wall, they are also a heavy metal band. I mean, play some of these songs in mixed companies, not just the hits, but, the heavier songs. And you'll see, This ain't Chuck Berry, and it's not even the Stones, who I love. This is heavy metal. Let There Be Rock is heavy metal with a rock and roll soul. I also think it was a big influence on the new wave of British heavy metal. If you look at the time period and a lot of people that got into that scene, I think AC/DC doesn't get kind of brought up in that discussion because they're not from England, but they were touring England quite a bit at this point, and Let There Be Rock was the album that helped them break into the UK. And of course, later on, they would get a British bassist and a British singer. So at this time period, I think that they were really, along with Judas Priest and Motorhead, I think AC/DC was a really important influence on the new wave of British heavy metal. And you can hear it, and also in thrash, and so many thrash bands you could hear, like in like Whole Lot of Rosie and Let There Be Rock. The songs are really fast and heavy, and they're throwing around a lot of cool guitar stuff. Probably I'd say this is probably Angus's greatest solos are on this album. My Hell Ain't a Bad Place to Be. Oh man, what a great song. And that's like kind of the archetype of every mid-tempo, big chords. Bam, 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 bam. Man, and Bond's lyrics are taken to another level. Plus, they pretty much have shaken off all the cheekiness of their earlier Aussie releases. There's one song on the Australian version of this album, Crap City in Blue, which is a little like the cheeky Jack Big Balls type stuff, but they didn't even use that in the international version. They replaced it with Problem Child. And it's funny because like She's Got Balls, like this was like one of the stronger tracks on Dirty Deeds, but now it kind of sticks out as having a different production and doesn't sound as hard rocking as the other stuff on the album. My favorite track on this album is a deep track, and it's epic. Overdose. Man, what a song. This is the kind of song, like, my wife's, even though she's Australian, she's not as big of an AC/DC fan as I am. And I played her this song once, and she was like, shit, that's a good song. So, like, if you got some people in your life that don't love AC/DC, play them Overdose, and they'll see that there's more going on with AC/DC than you might have realized. So this is a great album. It's a masterpiece. I think from this point on, I'd say pretty much every album from 77 into the early 80s can make claim to being the best AC/DC album. To me, it's almost like I said, like the Rolling Stones had the Big Four, where, well, AC/DC had the six-pack. That's what hardcore fans say, and that's like the last three of Bond and the first three of Brian. And more or less, I kind of agree with that. But this album, yeah, it's a masterpiece. But we can't keep talking about Let There Be Rock. We got to hit the other albums. Next is, whoa, ho, 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 this one, Powerage, 1978. Man, I can spend a whole evening talking about Powerage. You know why? Because it's my favorite AC/DC album. And it's always been my favorite album. It was magic the first time I heard the song. First time I heard the song was I saw them playing. I had most of their albums the first time I saw them. I got into AC/DC like junior high, and the first time I saw them live was at the Razor's Edge tour. And they did this, and I had most of their albums at this point except for two. I didn't have Powerage and Flick of the Switch because they weren't as well known as some of the other albums. So I was meaning to get to them, but I just hadn't gotten to them yet because I was still new to the band. But they played the song Sin City live. Oh my God, I have chills. I remember when I heard this song, there was just something so special about that song. And then when they get into the breakdown, the snakes and ladders and snakes. Oh man, I love this song. And I didn't even know. I ran out and I got Flick of the Switch because I didn't know. I thought, oh, it's Brian singing it, so I thought it might be a Brian song. Wasn't on that album. Then I finally get Powerage. And yeah, and not only was Sin City on it, but the whole album was a masterpiece, and it just blew me away, and it still blows me away. It's a little played out for me only because I listened to this song, this and one other album, which we'll get to, actually, well, really every AC/DC album. I've listened to so much growing up that I don't listen to it every week like I used to, but I still listen to it every couple times a year, and it's amazing. It's a masterpiece. Got Rock and Roll Damnation, Down Payment Blues, probably my second favorite AC/DC song. Actually, I would say like 4 or 5 of my favorite AC/DC songs are on this album. My favorite, Sin City, which is a masterpiece. It's just a badass tune, and that's probably my favorite Angus Young solo is on Sin City, and then it gets really gnarly, and then goes into that breakdown bass part. Oh man, and Bond's lyrics on this album or poetry. This is his masterpiece. It's all about desperation, and he's hungry. He wants. He's getting close to the top, but he's not quite there yet. It's still hard to trying to be a millionaire, and he's almost there. It's in his grasp, but he's not quite there. And Down Payment Blues. Whoa, man, this song, epic. I said the Overdose is epic, and play that song if you want to turn people on to AC/DC. You think it's just like You Shook Me All Night Long and Thunderstruck? Oh, man, play them Down Payment Blues. This song is almost a little like Velvet Underground at times, but ballsier in AC/DC. It has this great build-up, and there's this, it's such a great song, and Give Me a Bullet, another one of my favorite songs, and Gone Shooting. This album is very bluesy. It's very soulful. A lot of people, it's like kind of a musician's album, like Keith Richards and Eddie Van Halen, and the band themselves all really praise this album. So if you're just getting into AC/DC, buy Powerage like right away. Just go on Amazon, boom, 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 get it. You need it. I think, not only is it the greatest AC/DC album, I think it's the greatest rock and roll, hard rock / heavy metal / whatever, just music. It's one of the greatest albums of all time, and I'm just a total Powerage fanboy, so I just got to shut up. After that, they released a live album. Their only live official at the time of his living. If You Want Blood, You've Got It. Even though they didn't record that song yet, but I guess they're seeing into the future. And this is on the Powerage tour, and this is essential. Man, this is an album that I've grown to love more and more over the years. I remember when I was a teenager, essentially most of this album is Let There Be Rock, because that had become, especially in the UK when they were touring, that had become kind of that had become kind of the blueprint for their live show. So this album, it's a little like Kiss with Alive, how so many of the songs come from like the first album. Like Let There Be Rock kind of became the blueprint for every AC/DC concert, still to this day. And so save a song or two, this is kind of like Let There Be Rock with a few other songs from other albums. But man, and when I was younger, I liked the production better in Let There Be Rock. I thought this sounded a little thinner. But now, I don't know. I prefer, maybe because I didn't listen to it quite as much when I was younger, I prefer these versions now. Especially prefer the Let There Be Rock on this, where Bond just sounds so mean. Just this mean badger. It's going to kick your ass. And the Jack, being when I said before, I didn't really like the studio version. Well, this version I love. It doesn't have cheeky double entendre lyrics anymore. Now he's just singing straight up dirty lyrics about a dirty woman. And just everything about this album. Bond this is another thing, not only has the production and the guitars and the lyrics progressed on every album, Bond's singing has gotten better and better every album. And this is like, you can hear, and he hasn't even worked with Mutt Lange yet. This is like right on the cusp of that. And you can hear that Bond is singing in this heavier, like screaming, but still melodic while he's screaming style. And this is kind of the voice that you would hear in the next album, and also with Brian Johnson to a degree. This is kind of, when the vocals become as powerful as the guitars. So I love the shit out of this album. Anyway, so also essential. You got to get it. And then this leads to, sadly, the last album of Bon Scott, but also their big breakthrough album in the States, Highway to Hell. Whoa, Highway to Hell, 1979. Mutt Lange comes in, famous producer Mutt Lange, and he slicks them up, and they sound more commercial. But to his credit, not at the expense of their heaviness and their purity. Like, they still sound like AC/DC. They just sound like AC/DC that's a little more concentrated, a little more focused, and in a way, maybe not the raw heaviness of Let There Be Rock, but kind of more, I would say, orchestrated heaviness. Like, no, that's the wrong word. Sonic heaviness. Like, there's something sonically a little more powerful, which you can hear right out of the gate with the guitar chords, the opening guitar riff, Highway to Hell, of course, one of their most iconic and famous riffs. And it just sounds so big. I remember even the first time I heard this as a wee lad, I was just like, whoa, the guitar sounds so big on this song. And then the drums kick in, and the bass, and the chorus, and it's like, it's kind of like the final step of their evolution. Like, pretty much, with some variations in the next few albums, AC/DC this is the formula that's laid down for all subsequent AC/DC albums, and it's perfect. It's a perfect album. I love it. For a long time, this was like my second favorite AC/DC album. It's dropped a little bit in recent years, but I still love it. It's still my second favorite Bond album, maybe my fourth favorite overall. So, it's a masterpiece, and I mean, it's not just Highway Hell too. There's all these other great songs, which should be played on the radio all the time. Touch Too Much, really catchy as hell song. Don't know why this wasn't a hit, because it should have been a hit. You can kind of tell they were trying to write a hit. It's kind of like them doing almost like a kind of like Foreigner, or like like kind of like a Foreigner kind of like hard rock kind of radio friendly song, but heavier and a little meaner. Beating Around the Bush, great song, really fast, really awesome guitar riffs. Shot Down in Flames, Girls Got Rhythm, Walk Over You, If You Want Blood, You've Got It. They finally wrote the song. Night Prowler, oh my God, Night Prowler, what a great, it's a slow, boozy, dark, menacing song. And Bond's vocals are on yet another level. His greatest vocal performance. I think Powerage are his greatest lyrics, but Highway to Hell are his best vocals. In fact, you can hear, they kind of streamline the lyrics here too, which is also part of the formula that Brian Johnson and the band would continue with. They would kind of follow this template lyrically, where they're a little more streamlined. They're not quite as clever as they were in the earlier albums, and definitely not as clever as Powerage. Not as personal, just kind of badass and tough, and hey, let's go around and screw ladies and get drunk and rock and roll. But hey, ultimately, as great as Powerage is, and it's great that it has that little extra touch with the lyrics being so good, ultimately, you don't listen to AC/DC for lyrics. I mean, I don't really listen to any music for lyrics. I listen to music to rock and roll, and it's the feeling, it's the groove. So the fact that they kind of streamlined their lyrics doesn't bother me, there's only so many times you can bare your soul. Bond bared it on Powerage, and then he partied on Highway to Hell. So R.I.P. Bond, I love you, you're great, you're a rock and roll legend. And now we have to move on to 1980. You know this album, Back in Black. And there's no way you're watching this hour video of AC/DC reviews and you don't know Back in Black. It's the biggest selling hard rock album of all time. I think it's the second biggest selling album, period, after Thriller. I know sometimes this and the Eagles' greatest hits like bounce back and forth. Maybe Dark Side of the Moon. I haven't looked at the latest stats, but it's up there. It's Back in Black. You know most of these songs. They played them on the radio all the time. This is one of the albums, along with Powerage, I played so much when I was younger that a lot of it's played out. Plus, in addition, Back in Black is like one of the most omnipresent albums of all time. Like half of this album, if not more than half, are like radio staples. Plus, like at least 4 or 5 of these songs they always play live in concert. So I've heard a lot. I've heard this album so many times. But I tell you, considering how many times I've heard this album, I still love it. I still listen to it a lot. And in fact, it's still I'd say this is easily my second favorite AC/DC album. And I think it's objectively their second best. I mean, I think I'd give Powerage a slight edge with the lyrics. But man, everything is working. This is their best, I think, their best production. The production is flawless. It is the gold standard for rock and roll production. In fact, I think it's the greatest produced album ever. Rock and roll or otherwise. I think it does in like 1980. It doesn't sound dated at all. You don't hear this. This could have been. It sounds like it could have been recorded in 1970, 1990, 2000, 2010, 2020. I mean, it's ageless. I mean, this album, as soon as it hits, you got the bell and the guitar comes in, Hell's Bells, and it's timeless. This is timeless rock and roll and the greatest production ever. And let me tell you something. I love Bon Scott, so there's no disrespect to Bon Scott, and there would be no, Brian Johnson couldn't do what he did if Bon Scott didn't lay it out for him first, Brian was filling his shoes. That being said, I don't think Brian gets enough credit, because even though people all love Brian and they think he's like an affable bloke and all that, I still see kind of a trend of people kind of giving a little more respect to Bon, because he's the first, plus he died, so that always makes a person seem a little more legit to people. But let me tell you something. Only one man, in my opinion, could have replaced Bon Scott, and that was Brian Johnson. And this was crucial. At this moment, if they did not pick the right singer, That's it. There wouldn't have been, we wouldn't be talking about AC/DC right now. They picked the right singer at the right time. And man, listen to this guy's vocals. I mean, even before AC/DC, listen to some Geordie stuff he did, which was his Newcastle band in the 70s. I mean, Brian's screaming his head off there, and he's singing great. And he performed with Bon Scott during this period. In fact, it was Bon who had hipped Angus to who Brian Johnson was. So, I mean, this guy, it's like he's like John Fogerty to the next level. And in fact, I think if Bob might have been a stronger lyricist than Brian, I think vocally they're almost matched. In fact, maybe Brian has a slight edge. I mean, just listen when he hits that note, that high note, and Shoot to Thrill with the guitar. I mean, that's like Robert Plant type shit. And to me, that's like the peak of rock and roll. The peak of rock and roll happens in 1980 when Brian does that whole shoot me thing with the guitar. That's it. That's like the zenith. That's everything. Everything's been building up to this. That's it. Everything that was happening before was building up to that moment. It's the peak. And even though I know a couple years later, Brian wouldn't even be able to do it himself anymore. He couldn't hit those notes anymore a few years later. But here he could. So for a shining moment, I'd say from for the first half of the 80s, Brian Johnson could have been like the greatest hard rock, heavy metal singer, period. And live, oh my God, you ever see the Bell and Cannon tour? The clips from that? When he's got the bandana and the flat cap and that image, and he's snarling around on the stage, mean bastard. Bon would have loved this shit. And Brian brought that working class edge. Both him and Bon were working class. And, Brian was the real deal. And he was this grounded, great guy. And I say was, like he said. He's alive, and he's still kicking ass. And he might be coming back to AC/DC soon. But we'll talk about that later. But anyway, I love this man. I love Brian. And he helped AC/DC take it to the next level and finally have their biggest album of all time. So give the man credit for that. And God, listen to him on What Do You Do for Money, Honey? Oh, what a great song. And God, the guitars, everything's just working so well. It's so perfect. Probably my favorite song now on this album, only because it's not so burned out for me as much as the others, is Let Me Put My Love Into You. Man, let me put my love into you. So down and dirty, slow and sexy. And of course, Have a Drink on Me is great. And Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution, which, I think they did use some of Bond's lyrics on this, but not as much as some people say. I think they used some. But I think Brian and the band did like most of it. I'd say maybe about 75%, and maybe about 25% are some Bond leftovers. But I mean, this is it. I mean, it's kind of the ultimate AC/DC album because you got a little bit of the Bond hangover, but you got what Brian's bringing to the band, and you got the Young Brothers at their peak. And I never even mentioned before that Mark Evans was out of the band back in Powerage, and Cliff Williams joined. Okay, sorry about that. Sorry, Cliff. He's awesome, and Cliff also helped the band take it to the next level. Not only as, in my opinion, a superior bass player to Mark Evans. You can actually sometimes hear Cliff Williams playing the bass, sometimes. So. And he also was good backing vocals, so he helped beefed up the gang vocals. So by the time you got to 1980, you got, to me, they're two great lineups. It's the Powerage Highway to Hell lineup, and then there's the Back in Black for Those About to Rock Flick of the Switch lineup, and it's essentially the same lineup but with two singers. And to me, that's the peak of AC/DC. But then let's get to the next album. For Those About to Rock, We Salute You. For a long time, I would say, when I was younger, I said Powerage was their most underrated album, but it's not really underrated by hardcore fans anymore. Pretty much, if you're a hardcore fan, you know Powerage is awesome. And then I would say Flick of the Switch, but even now, in recent years, I noticed there's kind of a strong cult for Flick of the Switch. So as a result, I'm going to say this is the most underrated AC/DC album. And in fact, this album, I won't say it's my favorite. Like I said, Powerage and then Back in Black are my first two. Definitely, I objectively hear they're better than this. But god damn it, this is close. This is easily my third these days. And it's my go-to AC/DC album. Like when I feel like listening to AC/DC album, it's more often than not this album. And I think it's even a little bit better than Highway to Hell. And I know that might bother some people, but I just think this album, I pretty much like, there's one song on Highway to Hell, Love Hungry Man, which I think is just kind of okay. Whereas I love every song on this album. That's right. Even breaking the rules. So I just love it. This album, to me, this is kind of what was one of the last major steps of AC/DC musically. There's a lot of cool finger tapping and guitar work, and I mean, I don't get like how you can love Back in Black and not love this album, because this album sounds more like Back in Black than any other album ever. But it's actually a little darker even, and maybe a little bit more metal, which may be why it's not quite as beloved. I don't know, but it's a little dark. It's a little, let's say, it's a little more on the Hell's Bells side, and a little less on the You Shook Me All Night Long side, which is fine by me because I like my dark, evil sounding AC/DC. And you got that in spades with the title track, one of the greatest anthems of all time. Still gives me chills whenever I listen to it. And you got Evil Walks. Oh man, it's essentially just Hell's Bells Part 2, but hey, I'll take it. It's awesome. My favorite Brian Johnson song, Brian Johnson era song, and could maybe even break my top 5 along with maybe 4 Power songs. Spellbound. Spellbound is amazing. The riff, the mood, the atmosphere, kind of like Night Prowler, but maybe even a little darker and meaner, you know, and some good lyrics. I think Brian might not have been on par with Bond, but I think he was a little bit better than the Young Brothers when they took over in the 90s. He had a grit to it, that working class grit that he did bring to the lyrics. And Spellbound's a great example of that. I really love the lyrics in this song, you know. I can't do nothing right. I can't even start a fight. Really, just great stuff. And then you picture the headlights at night, and it evokes a feeling. Inject the Venom. Man, it's heavy. This is a heavy song, but bluesy. It's like heavy metal blues. Oh man, it could almost like be like if Motorhead did a slow song, which sometimes they do. But this is powerful. COD, catchy as hell song. Why wasn't that a hit? I don't know. Listen, if I Put the Finger on You, man, that song cooks. Listen, if you got a problem with this album, you got a problem with rock and roll. So just shut your mouth, because this album's awesome. And it's a classic. And man, Brian's vocals are, if anything, they're even better than on Back in Black. It's amazing. It's an amazing album. Masterpiece. Masterpiece. Okay, next. Flick of the Switch, 1983. Okay, Flick of the Switch. In some ways, I kind of always thought of this as kind of like, for a while, like kind of the powerage of Brian Johnson, whereas it was not one that was one of the more popular ones amongst casual fans, and you know, didn't have any hit songs, but yet it was awesome. So in that way, it is like powerage. But in some ways, it's also a little like Let There Be Rock, because it's really raw. It's in the same way I said that was the rawest and heaviest Bond, this is the rawest and heaviest with Brian. Easily their heaviest album, I think, at all. And almost it's a little bit more of a de-evolution. De-evolution, is that a word? Okay, we'll make it a word. De-evolution. I think it is. I think that's where the band Devo got their name from. For those about to rock, they kind of kept on progressing with Mutt Lange. Maybe they feared that they were one step away from becoming Def Leppard. So they didn't do that. And instead, they stripped back their sound and recorded a really minimalistic album, even down to the album cover. And it's when I first heard it on cassette when I was a youngin', I thought, like Guns for Hire was good and Nervous Shakedown, but the rest of the album didn't really do much for me. But then when the remasters came out in like the early O's, and I heard it for the first time on remastered CD, that's when the album really popped for me. And I noticed that's when they kind of had a renaissance with some other fans as well. So I think that remaster helped a lot. But it's like there's nothing really distinct about it, but it's got a groove. It's got this badass groove. It's kind of like, imagine the song Back in Black if it just played for like 30-something minutes straight and just kept kicking your butt. That's essentially Flick of the Switch, you know? Most of it's mid-tempo. There's about like 2 songs that are a little faster, the title track and Landslide. But most of it's a little mid-tempo, but it's got a groove. It's like one big song, a little like Aerosmith's Draw the Line that way. And I love this album. I love this album. It's bad. Now it might be a little overrated by hardcore fans because the songwriting is not as strong as it's been in past albums, but still, songwriting, schmongwriting. Who cares? It kicks ass. It rocks. And Brian, this is like kind of Brian's last time where he sounded this powerful vocally. I mean, this man screams his head off on every track. Every song is kind of like the peak moment of Brian's vocals, and I think he blew out his vocal side. singing this album. It's also the last time Phil Rudd plays with the band for a while. Apparently he had a throwdown with Malcolm. I think there were fisticuffs, and Phil, he recorded. I mean, he's on the album, but he wasn't in the promotional videos or this tour. They got this bloke, Simon Wright, and Simon Wright's like all right. He's all right, but he ain't no Phil Rudd, so Phil Rudd will be missed. But don't worry, he might come back later. So anyways, Flick of the Switch is done, and then we move to 1985, Fly on the Wall, one of the first AC/DC albums I ever bought. Fly on the Wall, great album, underrated. Yep, great album. I know it sounds like, well, he loves every album. Well, yeah, it's AC/DC. Rock and roll, deal with it. Fly on the Wall, very underrated. A lot of people think it's cheesy, 280s. I mean, yeah, there's too much reverb, as almost every album recorded in 1985. There's too much reverb. You should not have this much reverb on an AC/DC album. And unfortunately, there would be an album after this that has even more reverb. But short of the reverb and being a really kind of, maybe the mix is a little too trebly, and Brian's buried, and it sounds like they're maybe trying to hide his vocals. But then I saw clips of him singing from the '85 Fly on the Wall tour soundboard mix stuff on YouTube. He sounds great. He still sounds like early '80s, the first half of '80s Brian Johnson. His vocals are still really damn strong. So I don't know why they were throwing so much reverb over his voice on this album, and it sounds kind of like it's a little muddy. But that being said, the songwriting's probably, I would say it's a little stronger than Flick of the Switch. Maybe not quite on par with Back in Black for Those About to Rock, but a little stronger than Flick of the Switch. And I think it's Angus's greatest solos after Let There Be Rock. I mean, just listen to his solos. They're really high energy and melodic. And man, I mean, oh, I love his solo on First Blood. First Blood. Oh, that solo is like, no. It's badass. And Playing with Girls is a really badass Zeppelin-y kind of tune. I think this didn't Flick of the Switch. They kind of got into a good, like, kind of Zeppelin kind of groove. And Shake Your Foundations. They probably do the chorus one too many times. There is a few evidence of what I refer to as the Gene Simmons School of Songwriting, where they repeat the chorus way too many times. They do that on Shake Your Foundations and Hell or High Water, which interestingly enough is also a mid-'80s Kiss song, although a different song. You can hear that they're kind of not trying quite as hard lyrically, and with the choruses getting repeated a little too much. That being said, still a great album. I love the groove and vibes. Sink to Pink is a really well-written song, and that song kicks butt. My favorite song is probably the title track. I love the title track. It's just a bunch of chords just being bashed, but and Brian screaming like a dog, and it just got this like hot summer night feel. Fly on the Wall. It sounds like a perfect album on a summer night to go out and get drunk and maybe get in a fight, and it's got that vibe to it. It's really rowdy, and it's got like the gang vocals, and I love this album. And it's kind of the last full-fledged heavy metal album for AC/DC, I think. After this, they released Who Made Who, which was actually the first AC/DC album I ever got. I got into AC/DC when I was a Stephen King fan, and I saw the movie Maximum Overdrive, and that soundtrack and the music blew me away. I was like, where's this music been all my life? And essentially, this is just a soundtrack album where they just used a couple songs from Back in Black, Fly on the Wall. One song, only one Bon Scott song, but it's a great song, Ride On. And For Those About to Rock, We Salute You. And there's only one new song, Who Made Who, the title track. But man, that's like one of the best songs. And really clever lyrics by Brian. And two instrumentals, one of which, DT, is one of my favorite AC/DC songs. It's got such a great groove. And you know, Simon Wright, you know, he might not be Phil Rudd, but he's doing all right here. It's good groove, and man, I love the sounds of the guitar. And this kind of set up a little bit of the albums hadn't been doing as well after For Those About to Rock, Flick and Fly. There was a kind of a drop in AC/DC's popularity, and with Who Made Who, they started to kind of slowly climb up, and that leads us to Blow Up Your Video. Blow Up Your Video. Now, this is the album I probably I bounced the most around with in terms of how much I like it or don't like it. So this might be the first time I criticize AC/DC, just a little bit. But I do like this album. So if you're a Blow Up Your Video fan, rest assured. I like this album. I think it's a good album. In fact, I think the songwriting here is easily their best songwriting since For Those About to Rock, We Salute You. They sound like they're being clever and they're really, putting some thought into the riffs and the music. I think it's some of Brian's best lyrics. Actually, great song, Something for Nothing. Something for Nothing. It's almost this witty, this really clever wordplay. It's almost Bon Scott-esque at times. Really great stuff. So, these people think Bon Scott wrote like 100% Back in Black. It's like, well, how about you actually listen to some of the lyrics in the 80s? Some songs like this actually sound a little like something that Bon would have done. And Two's Up, great song. Nick of Time, probably my favorite song on the album. I love Nick of Time. Heat Seeker is probably the most known song on this album. Songwriting's great. So what's the problem? Problem is this production is horrible. I mean, it's really, really bad. It sounds a little bit better on vinyl, but on CD, it's a big mess of reverb. They put even more reverb than on Fly on the Wall, but it's not as heavy and as distorted as Fly on the Wall, so it just sounds kind of wimpy for AC/DC, mind you. I mean, hey, you compare this to like Poison or Bon Jovi or crap like that, there's no question this is much heavier and cooler than that stuff. But by AC/DC standards, and from what I know they can do, this production really lets down this album and the material. Plus, for the first time, I gotta say, it sounds like Brian really, he's struggling a bit vocally. Even though great lyrics, and he still has that swagger and cool and that snarl, and the raspiness, but he doesn't have that same power he had before. It sounds like his vocals were kind of blown out. And so, despite the strong songs, because of the reverb drenched production, the kind of lighter sound to the guitars, and Brian's weaker vocals, I have to say this is kind of the first major drop in an AC/DC album. Still, I really do like this album, and I really think the songs are good, and it sounds better on vinyl. So, and I like it much better than the next album, The Razor's Edge. Whoop-a-doo. This was the first new album that came out when I was young and got into AC/DC, so I was very excited about it. And back then, I thought it was good. I didn't think it was one of their best even then, but I thought it was good. Let me just say this. I don't think AC/DC, and I've said this before, I said this about the Motorhead, and I said this about the Rolling Stones, and now I'm saying about AC/DC. I don't think AC/DC ever released a bad album. This comes close. It's not bad, it's just kind of okay. There are some bad songs on it for the first time, actual bad songs on an AC/DC album. I mean, even the Aussie High Voltage didn't have bad songs. This album actually has a couple bad songs. And it's funny because this is their big comeback album. I mean, like, Who Made Who and Blow Up Your Video, they kind of slowly start to climb up to the top again. But Razor's Edge, forget about it. If you were there in, 1990? 1990, man, this album blew up. I mean, it had Thunderstruck. You know Thunderstruck. Rah, rah, rah. The ultimate jock rock song. And it's great. I don't really need to hear that song again, but you can tell that AC/DC put a lot of thought in writing a new anthem. He's like, we need a new For Those About to Rock, We Salute You, And so they came up with Thunderstruck, and that's why it's like the last song that became like a concert staple. And it did what it needed to do, and it's a great song. It's actually one of the few songs where the production doesn't really ruin it for me, and Brian's vocals. But Brian's vocals, even though they're not trying to cover it up with reverb anymore, you could tell his vocals are even weaker than they were in Blow Up Your Video. He just doesn't have the same power, and sometimes he just sounds kind of like a constipated badger on this album. But, like a cool constipated badger. And there's some really lame stuff like Mistress for Christmas, and I mean, this is not a CD age, so you're getting some filler, some tracks that wouldn't have made the cut of a 10-song album, which I think would have benefited this album. My least favorite AC/DC song, and I really think this is a bad song, is Let's Make It. Ugh, just really crappy song. But there are some shining moments on this album. Fire Your Guns, my favorite song in this album. This song is great. Sounds like it could be off a flick of switch. Just down and dirty really quick. I really also love the third single from the album, Are You Ready? Are You Ready is great. That to me almost sounds like with different production that could have been on Fly on the Wall. It's just a good bar tune, and good sing-along and rowdy. I like She's Got You by the Balls. That's an alright song. Shot of Love's alright. Could have been better. It sounds a little like Huey Lewis in the News, in my opinion. I actually did a podcast with Ralph Vieira and Ian Wadley, who are two awesome guys. They do the Rock and Metal Combat podcast, and if you haven't listened to this podcast, you need to do it because it's the greatest podcast out there on the internet. And I've guested a few times on their podcast, and we discussed this album. the Razor's Edge on one of them, and you hear what we all have to say about this album. And so this, in my opinion, is the worst AC/DC album. Like I said, it has some good songs, but overall, I mean, the worst thing about it is the production by this guy, Bruce Fairbairn, or Fairbairn. I don't know how you say his name. He did Aerosmith and like Bon Jovi. He just strips AC/DC of all their heaviness, and it's just too streamlined. And the drummer now, they lost Simon Boy, and they got Chris Slade, the bald dude. Chris Slade might be a nice guy. I don't know. You know, I'm sure he is, but I don't like him as a drummer in AC/DC. I think he's just really bland, and it's also the production doesn't do him any favors. He sounds like a drum machine. Sounds like a drum machine on this album. So, you know, I'm really missing Phil Rudd. And, you know, so maybe that's it for AC/DC. Maybe that's it. No, they come back in a big way. Ball Breaker. I love Ball Breaker. This is a divisive album for some people. Some people think this album's slow and stupid. And you know what? It is slow and stupid. But you know what? The blues are slow and stupid. That's what it's about, man. You know, people think the blues is all about, ooh, woe is me. That's not what the blues is about. Actually, listen to some Alan Wolf and Muddy Waters albums, and you'll know what the blues is about. It's about machismo. Blues is about a guy strutting in and saying, I'm going to screw every girl here, and I'm going to start a fight, and I'm going to drink. All that stuff that we associate with rock and roll and heavy metal and maybe even gangster rap started with the blues. Listen to some blues lyrics. And blues is, you know, just because not everything's got to be fast, you know. I mean, yeah, it might have been nice if they threw in one or two faster songs on this. But, man, this is just a slow, dark, evil blues album. And in fact, I think this album has the spirit of Powerage a lot. It's not as clever as Powerage. The songs aren't as good for the most part, but it's got that vibe. Rick Rubin did the production, and it's a little dry, but I don't mind it. Don't mind the dryness. To me, this is the real comeback. Like Razor's Edge was the comeback for the casuals, you know. But to the cretins, this was the real comeback, you know? Ball Breaker, because Phil Rudd is back, and Phil Rudd just brings that groove. There's just a groove with Phil Rudd that you don't get with any other AC/DC drummers. It's just like, he's like the Charlie Watts of the band. You can't have AC/DC to me. It's not 100% AC/DC without Phil Rudd. He's just as important as the Young Brothers, in my opinion. And this album also, the lyrics are really dirty. Like, this is a really filthy album. I mean, it's kind of stupid, because the Young Brothers lyrics are always a little stupid, but it's so dark and sleazy, and it's like very un-PC, especially at a time where music was getting more PC. So I love it. And the title track, like, now that's a heavy song. Ball Breaker, woo, man, I love that song. And Burning Alive is great. Hail Caesar, the Honey Roll, I like that song a lot. I love this album, and you know what? It's up there. I mean, it's not as great as the Six Pack, or maybe not even Fly on the Wall, but it's close. It's like right on Fly on the Wall's ass. I mean, I really love this album. And Brian, he doesn't sound. I mean, he's not sounding the way he did in the early '80s, and I don't think he ever could. But he's learning to work with his ruined voice on this album. Like, the raspiness is like, he's leaning into it in a bluesier way now. Like, he's learning to sing with his second voice on this album, and he would get better and better with each subsequent album from this point on. I just love everything about this album. I love the vibe. It's a great album. And also, around this time, there was a great single, actually right before this album, Big Gun. Man, you gotta get backtracks to get this, but get backtracks just to get this song. I mean, this and like Bon Scott's Cold Hearted Man. I love this song. Big Gun is just one of the greatest AC/DC songs, and the riffs are perfect, and Brian sounds tough, and I love this period. And even though Chris Slade plays on it, it doesn't even sound that bad because Rick Rubin's productions helps him out. So this is a great period. It's kind of a comeback for AC/DC, and then we got 2000 Stiff Upper Lip. Stiff Upper Lip. Now, this is probably the AC/DC album, I would say, my estimation of it has grown the most over the years. When I first heard this album, save for the title track, which I loved right out of the gate, I loved the bluesy kind of ZZ Top quality of it, and Brian sounded the best he had sounded in years, you know, learning to really work his bluesier singing style. But short of that, I thought the songs were a little bland, and to me it didn't have that same dark edge as Ball Breaker. And it doesn't. It doesn't have the same dark edge or production. Although I would say maybe the production's stronger for the most part. In fact, I think this is their best production post for those about to rock since Mutt Lange. It's George Young did it, and he did a great job. The guitars sound great. They got this really great 70s tone to it. It sounds, some of the songs like Meltdown sound straight out off of like Dirty Deeds or Power Witch. Like it has a really great guitar tone, and the riffs are really intricate and interesting again. And it has a bluesy vibe, just like Ball Breaker. It's a rootsy album, but it sounds like they're bringing in a little more of that finger tapping and stuff from like Blow Up and For Those About to Rock. And I really love this album. It's grown a lot over the years. It's kind of an album only an AC/DC fan could love, you know, short of like maybe the title track, maybe Satellite Blues, which is a really catchy song. And that song sounds straight off of Power Witch. I really like this album a lot. Well, I love this album. It's a great album. Used to like it. Now I love it. To me, this works really well with Ball Breaker. It's like a 1-2 punch. In the same way Flick of the Switch and Fly on the Wall were a 1-2 punch of rawness. This is like a 1-2 punch of rawness. So if you want the real deal, there it is. And then we get to 2008's Black Ice. Black Ice. Okay, Black Ice. This is probably, if Stiff Upper Lip was the album where my estimation has risen the most over the years, Black Ice is probably the one that has dropped the most in recent years. When it came out, I was like, oh, this is great. This is better than Stiff Upper Lip. Now I don't think so. I don't think it's better than Stiff Upper Lip. In fact, it's probably my second least favorite AC/DC album. But it's not bad. In fact, there's not one song on it that's bad, unlike Razor's Edge. So it's better than Razor's Edge. Although I will say this, Razor's Edge does have a couple songs like Are You Ready and Fire Your Guns that I like better than any song on Black Ice. But then again, there's no songs as bad as Mistress for Christmas or Let's Make It. So, you know, it depends on what you're going for. If you're going for consistency, Black Ice is definitely better. But still, it's got way too many songs, too much filler. It's nothing bad. Like I said, no bad songs, but there's really not a lot of standouts. And Rock and Roll Train was like the single from it. That's a catchy song. It's like one of the better songs on the album. I like a song called Smash, Grab, and Take It. I think that's the lyrics. I think that's the title. Anyway, I don't listen to this album so much anymore. It's good. A lot of mid-tempo stuff. The production's really good. And Brian sounds the best he had sounded since Fly on the Wall. His vocals sound really good on this album. And I remember when I first heard Rock and Roll Train, that was the first thing that hit me was, wow, Brian sounds really, really good. Maybe taking a 5-year break between albums has really helped his vocals. So it's an all right album. Nothing wrong with it. But I'd say it's their second weakest album. And I don't listen to it so much. But it's all right. Then we get to their last studio album, 2014, Rock or Bust. Rock or Bust is essentially anything that was good about Black Ice, they emphasized, and anything that was not great about Black Ice, they got rid of. So essentially, it's a better Black Ice. And I think it's really good. It's shorter because now we're past the CD age and now we're back to the vinyl age again. It's going full circle where bands are actually making albums for vinyl releases now. And as a result, we get short albums again. In fact, I think Rock or Bust is like their shortest album since Flick of the Switch. And the production is good, but maybe even a little meatier than on Black Ice. When I first heard it, I thought this was like, I got really excited. Especially when I heard the title track. I wasn't so crazy about Play Ball. That to me sounded a little bit too much like the Black Ice stuff. But when I heard Rock or Bust, whoa, I was like, yeah, this is like Flick of the Switch kind of stuff here. I really love that riff, and man, and Brian sounds even better than he did on Black Ice. Like he keeps sounding better on every album. I don't know if they're helping him in the studio or it's just taking the breaks, or he's just learning to sing more. Now he's singing a little more like he did sometimes in Geordie. Like it's not just about screaming, but some really bluesy, soulful singing. I mean, he just sounds great. I mean, I think he's like the VP on this album. He sounds amazing. And when I heard this album, I was really excited, and I thought it was like their best since Flick. I don't think that anymore. In fact, I would say Fly is better. I also think Ball Breaker and Stiff Upper Lip is better. Might be better in Blow Up Your Video. Not in terms of the songs. The songs are probably, I think the songwriting is better in Blow Up Your Video, but I think the overall production vibe and Brian's vocals kind of give this a slight edge on that album. I mean, there's even I mean, it's just amazing how they kind of just tweaked everything about Black Ice. Like, there's a song called "Anything Goes" on Black Ice, which it's all right. It's a little too poppy for my taste. It sounds a little slick and generic. And then they have a song on this album which almost is like the same song called "Rock the Blues Away," except for now it's much better. It's like now they took away the slickness and the poppiness, and now they just make it this great, almost a Slade-sounding, early 70s, Geordie-sounding rock and roll blues song. And it's great. I love that song. And Rock and Roll Thunder, got some Rock and Roll Thunder, that's a great song. And it's a solid AC/DC album. Doesn't reinvent the wheel, but it confirms that AC/DC is AC/DC. Even though sadly, Malcolm Young is not on this album because he passed away between Black Ice and this album. But they did use some of his riffs, and anyone who's a hardcore AC/DC fan knows that Malcolm was the real leader in the band. And behind the scenes, he was coming up with most of their riffs, especially the ones that are more chord-based. Angus was more like the note guy, doing like the finger tap and shit. And Malcolm's like the guy who does the more heavy bluesy kind of chords. So they were still using some of his chords. So you got the spirit of Malcolm on this album, in the same way you had the spirit of Bon on Back in Black. So to me, it still sounded like AC/DC, and to me, they were still honoring Malcolm by using some of his riffs. So it's good. It made me, and I saw them live. I saw them live on this tour, and Brian sounded great, man. I sounded great. This was like the last leg before he had his hearing problem, and Axl took over for him. But I think Brian sounded great. And man, that guy has great stage presence. And I'm excited. I hear the rumors are now that Brian is actually back in the band. Not just that, but Phil Rudd, too, even after he almost had someone whacked. But he didn't do it. He was just considering it. It's just an option. It was on the table. Maybe I will kill this person who I want to not exist anymore. But he didn't do it. So that's the important thing. So, and the even more important thing is that he plays drums of AC/DC, because that's what that man is meant to do. And they say, some rumors say that they're going to use some more of Malcolm's riffs again. So if that happens, that'd be great. It'd be great to maybe do one last hurrah album and one last hurrah tour of Brian. That'd be great, because they didn't really get to do that last time. Everything just kind of fell apart. Like Phil and Brian were on this album, and then within a year they weren't touring with the band anymore. So it was kind of sad to see it end that way. So I'd like to see them kind of get back and have as much as the Back in Black lineup as you can possibly get, without Malcolm there. But anyway, I did talk about live albums of Brian. Unfortunately, Brian, unlike Bon, they did not record him. Well, they did record him, but they didn't do an official album of Brian Johnson during his peak years in the 80s, which would have been great. I know there was some plans of releasing a live album of Brian in 83 or 84, like during the Flick of the Switch tour, and that would have been awesome. They opened up those shows with Guns for Hire. And that would have been great, just like kind of like Riff Raff on If You Want Blood. But unfortunately, they didn't do that. Instead, some of these tracks that they recorded, you can hear as B-sides and stuff. A lot are on backtracks, and to me, backtracks, not only is it good to get for like Big Gun and like Cold Hearted Man, and for some of those Aussie-only tracks, you'll hear the best live Brian stuff on that compilation. Because otherwise, the most famous one, it's one of their biggest albums, is Live from the early 90s. And it's, by that point, that's the Razor's Edge tour. That's the tour I was at. And so, there's a little bit of nostalgia for me there. And it has a great set list. So that set list is amazing. And they play Sin City and stuff, and Who Made Who, and a lot of tracks from the Brian era that they wouldn't play so much afterwards. So it's a great set list, but Brian is just not at his best, and it's that Bruce Fairburn guy again producing it, so it sounds a little bit better in Razor's Edge, but it's not, to me, it's not the best document of Brian Johnson and the band. To me, it should have been like something from the early 80s, for Bell and Cannon or Flick of the Switch tour. But you can also see some of that stuff in the Plug Me In compilation, which you'll see a lot of cool Bon and Brian live stuff on that. Plus, for Bon Scott, you got to see the Let There Be Rock movie. It's a Highway to Hell tour, one of the greatest concert films of all time. So you got to see that, and you hear, oh my God, Live Wire, the beginning, they open with Live Wire. It's amazing. They did a second Brian Johnson live album called Live at River Plant. Is that what it's called? Might listen to it once in my life. It's not bad. I mean, it's for the Black Ice tour. It's just it's got a really boring set list, and you know you've heard it all before. And Brian sounds better than he does on live, but the set list isn't as good. And so you don't need to own that, not in my opinion. And there was another soundtrack compilation, Iron Man 2, which you also don't need because even though it's got awesome songs, I mean, hell, they even got like cool deep tracks like Evil Walks and Guns for Hire on it. But that being said, everything that's on this you can get on another album. It's not like Who Made Who, where you get at least one new song and the two cool instrumentals. So you don't get anything new on this. So there's no reason for it to exist except for to have a kind of tie-in with an Iron Man movie. But hey, if it got some like, you know, some 10-year-old boy buying AC/DC albums, you know, if it was Gateway, so good, mission accomplished there. But you guys don't need it. You guys, you're going to go and buy their albums because that's what you should do. And I think that's it. Am I forgetting everything? No, I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. So anyway, AC/DC, one of the greatest bands ever. You can discuss. You can think I'm crazy because I like stiff upper lip so much. I don't know, you know. So, but still, you know, what can I say? I just love this band. I'm getting drunk, so I'm gonna wrap this up before I make a fool of myself. And rock and roll.